So in the last couple of weeks, I have been reviewing a couple of romance books because I'm taking a romance class, right? And while I am taking a romance class, I will be reading who knows how many romance books throughout the semester. And I'm happy to read romance books because it gets me into the genre and it kind of gets you to figure out more actively what I like and dislike and what I truly hate. And the romance books I've read have been hit or miss or just kind of like right in the middle. Um, I hated Guilty Love, of course, because that one just broke me. I enjoyed Her Night with the Shifter and the Colton Encounter. I didn't fully enjoy A Very Intimate Takeover based on the review you guys kind of saw last time. And Black Sheep Bargain was very enjoyable as well. And now we have His Until Midnight. Here's my review I put on Goodreads. Oh wow, I wrote it October 4th at 1:21. Look at that, PM. I wrote on Goodreads, the most boring romance I've ever read. That's all I wrote on Goodreads. And we're going to talk about why that is. So I do want to warn you that a lot of the complaints I have in this for this book, a lot of it fall on the boring part, but I do think for me, at least, that this book got me bored. It was so boring to a point where I actually had to, I didn't want to go on Audible and buy the book, but there was a point where I got halfway through the book. I literally got to chapter 10 and I'm like, no, I cannot read this anymore. And I actually had to buy it on Audible. And I decided to finish the last half of the book in one sitting. And I changed my usual speed from 2.5 to 3.5 so that I could get it done much faster because I didn't want to read anymore. And the whole plan was to try to finish it in Braille. But honestly, the energy that it took for me to get up to read this book, or to get up, like the energy to open the book on the e-reader, was non-existent. I despised this book. I despised it so much, and I'm going to talk about it. I think there are some objective writing things I can say, but a lot of this, like every other review I make, is definitely going to be subjective. But first, before we get to the review, a quick reminder: if you like my content, definitely hit the like button. Also, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on His Until Midnight. And consider subscribing to my channel. I usually post on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday or I do my best to post at this time, 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so that way people pretty much have something to watch at pretty much any time, I guess, in a weird way, because like if we're talking Pacific, you have a video from me at 2 a.m. in Central Time at 4 a.m. But the point is, I usually post at 5 a.m. and you can also subscribe to my blog where I share reviews like I do in this channel, but I also share my creative work. I talk a lot about my writing, specifically on Wednesdays, which I have dedicated to like writing based things and vlogs. So you can definitely check it out on Wednesday and tell me, and you can pretty much judge my writing for yourself. But with that, let's go to the synopsis of this book. To the highest bidder... Oh, wait, before I do. I do want to say that this is book 4 of a series called the Texas Cattleman Club Bachelor Auction. This is book 4 in that series. I'm assuming I don't have to read the other 3. And I'm not planning to read the other 3. I already hated this book. Why would I go back? Now, for Black Sheep Bargain, I enjoyed, so I actually might go back and read the other 3 books. But this? No. No, not necessary. Here we go. To the highest bidder goes A Friendship with Benefits. When Tessa Noble takes the stage at a charity auction after a sexy makeover, her best friend, Ryan Bateman, must place the winning bid. It's definitely not because he's jealous. Their weekend getaway is a ploy for positive press, or so the rancher tells himself. But soon things take an unexpected turn from platonic to passionate, catapulting the couple far beyond the friend zone. I want to say I actually might end up, I might go into some broad spoilers with this book because I think I need to go into some broad spoilers. But first, let's go for like the non-spoilery section. So the prose in this book was not necessarily bad. It was written in a pretty accessible and digestible way, so it's easy to read. And the chapters in this book is really short. So that's definitely makes people kind of, turn the page even faster because the chapters are short. So it's not like I have to, I don't have to worry about like it's just fast. It's a fast read in some ways. Again, I had a change between Braille and audio because I was bored, but I'll explain. A lot of the reasons I was really bored were definitely the story execution, the little bit of the tropes, and the characters. And I want to say right now, tropes are not bad. They're not inherently bad. What's really bad is usually the execution of tropes. The tropes that we have here are definitely best friends to lovers, a trope I think I can definitely get behind on. And then there's the miscommunication trope, which I know people usually don't like. However, I don't hate. There are people that literally hate this trope, the miscommunication trope, and there are people that also don't like best friends to lovers all the time. But there are people that genuinely hate the miscommunication trope. I don't hate it. Tropes are not inherently bad. The issue usually comes with execution. So if you are writing a trope and it's not executed well, the trope is not to blame. A lot of it is the execution. And though I like both of these tropes, the execution in this story, it didn't work. It didn't work. The pacing in this book is actually a pacing I would normally enjoy. It is not super fast, and it is not. It's actually a very slow paced story. Now, I do enjoy this because slow paced or medium paced books give us time to get to know the characters, get to spend time with them. So like that is like the main pro for slow pacing. The con would be that if you make it too slow, it becomes really boring. And this is what the author did. It was very, very slow. So slow that our inciting incident didn't happen till about chapter 7, maybe chapter 5. Chapter 5 is not bad, but we found out about the inciting incident. We, as the reader, found out on chapter 7. Like the problem came to be in chapter 7. We didn't get a conflict till then. Everything else was just happening. And the first couple of chapters of this book follow a very similar like writing style to a really interesting kind of beginning. It's a very cliche beginning. So this cliche beginning you can find in things like Hunger Games and Divergent, except that for those books it kind of makes sense, where we kind of get the lead up to the events, right? So what we usually get in something like Hunger Games and Divergent is we start in the character's daily life. We usually, specifically in Divergent, we kind of see them going to, in Divergent specifically, we see them going to school. We see Triss going to school. We see her kind of follow through the school day a little bit, and we see her there, and we see her going from home to the bus to school, and we see like the other factions a little bit through her eyes, and we get to see her take like the aptitude test, and we get to see then that first day before the choosing ceremony. Then in Hunger Games, we see Katniss as she kind of like hunts, and then they prepare for the reaping. So these are beginnings that make sense for those books because it's not necessarily that it's a lead up, but we know it's that there's going to be an event happening. And we kind of know that there's going to be an event happening in this book, we know that there's going to be an event happening. We find out kind of like in the very beginning of the first chapter, I think. But the problem is that we don't have we take too long to get there. And part of it is spent on her makeover, which by the way, I already did not like the makeover scene because she has like in the beginning she had like curly hair, and for some reason they like I guess they like straightened it, and I think now she has like wavy hair or something. But she had, but you know, she had curly hair. I don't see the. I honestly never like these makeovers in anything I read or watch because what they do is they just like they're like you know, we're gonna let down your hair, we're gonna like blow dry your hair, and that's the extent of the makeover, which is to change like the hair and the texture of the hair. And I don't like that because I think that people have their own hair types and we should be mindful of that, and we should not encourage we should not encourage people feeling bad about that kind of hair they have. I encourage change if you want to. I just don't encourage making people feel kind of bad about the hair that they have. So that's just my 2 cents. That was not asked for, but here's what I've got. That's my thought. So yeah. Um. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired, you guys. So that's that. Other things is that these characters are basically cardboard boxes to me. They're very boring. They're established kind of okay, yet they have less personality to me than vanilla ice cream. But I can't compare them to because vanilla ice cream is actually good and these characters are bad. It kind of reminded me of the Savior's Champion and the Savior's Sister, but that is not a good comparison. It's actually a better comparison to the Spanish Love Deception, which has similar characters. While they don't follow the same tropes, they do have a similar kind of characters. They're kind of like, especially with Tessa, they're kind of like they're just slightly, just a teeny tiny smidge of blank slates, but barely. So yeah. Now the romance, I really couldn't believe the romance. I could not suspend my disbelief hard enough to believe this romance. And a lot of it has to do with the way it was executed. Now I'm going to talk about broad spoilers when I talk about the tropes here and when I talk about the romance. So that is kind of like my non-spoilery section. Actually, wait, no, I'm not fully done. One non-spoilery thing when it comes to the writing of this book. There are at least 2 chapters, or at least like a section of a chapter and another chapter, but I'm going to say 2 chapters that could have been cut from this book, and it would have made this book at least 20 pages shorter. And honestly, I think this book was a little bit too long based on what it was trying to tell, just because you spent too much time in these areas, and none of it just it didn't work. The pacing is actually too slow when you think about it. Like I said, I generally would like it, but the pacing is too slow because we spend too much time on each area. So yeah, anyway, now I'm going to go into broad spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers at all, this is your warning. I'm going to go in 3, 2, 1. So this book relies heavily on best friends to lovers and miscommunication trope. More on the miscommunication trope than not. So the reason that I think I can get behind best friends to lovers because it's kind of adorable. You know, you kind of grow up, you figure out you kind of like someone in that way. I think it's possible for you to see a person and grow up with a person and be like, and I don't see that person that way. She's my best friend. She's great, right? Like they're my best friend. I don't see them that way. I see them as my best friend. I think that's possible for a trope. You can do that. But the way that this book did it was slightly insulting, in my opinion. Kind of insulting. I don't like this way that it was done. So basically, we have a supposedly, okay, we kind of know that Tessa has had feelings for Ryan for some time now. And supposedly he kind of noticed her but didn't recognize it. That is what we're being told, that he didn't necessarily recognize the attraction that he had. I have a hard time believing it, but okay, again, I have a hard time believing it. But then the reason this is a bit insulting, in my opinion, is because he kind of started noticing her a little bit more. The way I interpreted the book, keep in mind, you as a reader might interpret it differently, but the way I interpreted the book is that he kind of started noticing her the moment that she became pretty. And the moment that she was made over and her hair was just turned to like wavy, silky, wavy hair or whatever it is. So she kind of became like, he kind of started to kind of notice her a little bit more. Like, he says that the reason he kind of never tried anything with Tessa is because of a pact he made with her brother, you know, not to touch her in that way, or not to get involved with her in any way. Sometimes they fought or whatever. But I don't care. That's just you. I don't know. I feel like the author needed something. It feels like the author needed something to justify the reasons that they never confessed to each other. These tropes actually go hand in hand in this book. That's why I'm saying it this way. So it feels like the author needed a reason, and it's like, oh, you know, they didn't want to ruin friendship. They didn't want this. Oh, this pact and this is perfectly reasonable why they wouldn't do something. So it feels like the author just like needed a reason for them not to be honest with each other. And the reason falls flat because they're best friends, I guess. For me, that's why the trope falls flat, because it feels kind of shoehorned in, because the reason to me is slightly stupid, especially considering that he especially started to notice her, and I mean especially, like, he started to paying a little bit more attention to her when he saw her all dressed up, all made up, with her hair really pretty. It is explained that the reason she never dresses up like this, and by the way, it makes sense. This thing makes sense. But the reason that she never dresses up is because, the boys in her school, when they noticed she was like developing breasts, they became stupid, and they would basically, sometimes they would say on quote unquote accidents, but too many things basically were happening that they would find excuses to feel her up. So she ended up just like dressing into like a tomboy kind of thing in order to, you know, not be as noticeable. And I think that makes sense. I will give that makes sense. But again, between her and Ryan, there is barely any romantic chemistry, because they just act like friends as they are. And that's fine if you're going to write a friendship, but if you're going to write a romance, I think more chemistry is necessary, and I don't think it has it. And as for the miscommunication trope, it's relied on, especially at the toward the last half of the book. So by the last half of the book, they've already had sex. They've already been physically intimate, and of course it was not expected to, but they did. They had sex and everything. So they already had their thing, right? But they don't communicate after that. It's just that they had sex, and they're like, okay, let's leave it alone. Let's not mess up our friendship, blah blah blah. and they don't talk to each other. They don't, nothing happens of uh nothing happens after after they have sex, because they don't talk about, there's nothing that happens in this, in between them, that helps them communicate. So she supposedly just like decided, let's not do this, and then they kind of just go on to their lives. She ends up about to go out with someone else, and she's like, I'm not interested in with you because you tend to not have many committed relationships or whatever, which kind of makes sense, but barely. But again, the miscommunication trope doesn't work here, because they've known each other forever and they already had sex, honestly. And I just don't feel like it makes sense here. I have to suspend my disbelief way too much for that. That's it. Those are like my very broad spoilers. So yeah, that's it. I don't know what else to say when it comes to this book. I think this book is just, it's not that great. I gave it 1 star because I was really bored, and again, it was too slow a story. Inciting the conflict that we got happened in a really slow way, and usually I love it, but it is boring in this book because there's just nothing for me to hold on to that's interesting, and I hate it so much. Again, if it was not for a class, I would have not read this book, but I had to read it for class, so I did. Yay. So next week, for next week's review, we're gonna go back to an old series that I was reviewing in this channel. Well, not reviewing, but I started reviewing in the channel and never continued, and that is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I reviewed the first book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but I have not continued with the rest of the series, and we are going back to it. I will be reviewing next week The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. I'm so happy we get to start July. At least that is my plan, to start July in such a lighthearted way. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is coming out before July 4th too. Is it? Hold on. Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So yeah, that is my review. I don't know what to say. I don't enjoy this. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts on His Until Midnight. The one thing I will say too about this book is that it's almost like it tried to do something on like Cinderella-ish, especially with the title His Until Midnight. And the reason I say it is because you have the whole Cinderella part where you have like where Cinderella shows up at the ball, but she has to leave right before midnight, so that because her stuff her magic will go away. It feels like that, but done so terribly wrong. And I don't like it. Ella Enchanted did a better job, and Ella Enchanted is a fairy tale. It's amazing how bad this is. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on His Until Midnight. Consider subscribing to my channel. I post usually Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That way you have something to watch when you wake up. And I also have a blog. Consider subscribing to the blog, which I have in the description. I share reviews like I'm doing this channel, but I also share my creative writing. That way you yourself can be the judge if I'm a good writer or not as well. Because I do talk a lot about my writing and how much I've kind of grown on Wednesdays and my thoughts on the writing. So yeah, something to definitely consider is checking out my writing if you are up for it. And until next time, consume stories. Bye.